So, is red New York inevitable? We'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do, please consider subscribing, leaving a like on this video, comment down below. Let me know what you think about the New York governor election. Now, getting into this, we will be talking about a recent Trafalgar Group poll, one of the more reputable pollsters. They have recently dropped a poll, as you can see, that has Lee Zeldin, the Republican candidate running for governor, ahead of Kathy Hochul by 0.8%. That surely is a bit of a shocker. That's not something that I think anybody would have expected a little bit ago, let alone ever, really, but especially now. It's not a massive surprise with the trends we've been seeing. I still didn't think we'd see a poll with Zeldin leading at all before the election. I thought it would get close. I thought there'd be a few that would have it within margins of error, but I did not see one or even imagine it was possible to see one with a Republican leading in the state of New York, a state that voted 30 points for Biden. So this just tells you something. Now, oh, well, maybe they didn't do the poll well, or there's something off about this poll, or no, it's Trafalgar Group, they're crazy right-wingers, even though they got the New Jersey and the Virginia governor polls almost dead on when everyone else got them off. So that's a little bit of something to consider. Now, there is 4% undecided, so that likely will help decide at the end of the day what happens here, assuming this poll is fairly accurate. We're going to look into this a little bit more. Party participation, pretty much on par with the actual registration of party in the state, within a couple points each. This pretty much accurately represents it, but this is something to consider. 53.6% Democrats party participation in this poll, and we're seeing Zeldin leading. So that means 0.6% or 6% of Democrats, potentially more, are not voting for Hochul, because I'd assume at least some of these no party voters are voting for Hochul. I don't imagine all 19% went right to Zeldin, but that's something to consider. If you see that, that means there's a large number of Democrats who may not even be voting for Hochul, and that's not going to help. That's what you need, though, to win in a state like this. You can't win without getting a certain amount of the Democrat vote. But even as we saw in some of the early voting numbers, Democrats are generally underperforming compared to what you'd expect. So that could also have an impact, and it could be a sign that this very well may be the reality of the election. And even if this is the party participation, that doesn't mean that these voters are 100% going to get out, because right now, generally, Republicans are more enthused to vote than Democrats. They have the enthusiasm on their side. They have the national environment. They have a lot going for them right now, and Hochul's not really a popular person. Now, looking a little bit further, there's the age. I'm not going to look too closely at age participation. Generally, this is fairly good. It's not going to play a huge role. Demographics is fairly accurate as well. Now, this is off by maybe about a point. I believe the state of New York, it's like 53% female and 47-ish% male. So maybe that's a slight but minuscule oversample of women. Women do tend to vote more Democrat, so that could actually, it wouldn't be a much, but it very well could shift this potentially slightly more, like 0.1 or 0.2 to the right, which at most would lead to a 1% lead for Zeldin. So it's quite minuscule and has such a minor effect. But either way, Zeldin is still leading. And even if these demographics, they're not perfect, even if they're slightly off, then it actually favors the Republican. It does not favor the Democrat. So that is huge. Now, we also have another poll. This one I'm not going to break down as closely. From Politico. New poll. Lee Zeldin within 1 point of Kathy Hochul. 1 point. 46%. 45 for Zeldin. So we're having multiple pollsters showing this race closer than what anyone could have expected. Again, ever. I don't think anyone thought that a red New York was possible at any point, especially in 2022. Like, maybe if it was going to happen, it's going to be a while of trends to the right? But that does not seem to be the case. It seems that very well right now, Zeldin could be the next governor of New York, and that could be huge. It will be huge for the state of New York, and it could actually be finally a good step to resolving some of the issues the state has been suffering for so long. Now, on top of this, we have the actual polling averages. I'll just look at these from 538. I've mentioned my gripes with 538 overall. They're not amazing, but still, they only have a 6.8% lead for Hochul. That's not including those two other polls that have Zeldin within margins of error or ahead. Now, these polls, this one was conducted fairly recently, this one somewhat recently, and these are starting to get older and older. So we can also see, even if these polls show a larger lead at this time for Hochul, there's also still a large amount undecided, and overall, she's not getting any further than about 54% in any of these. So she doesn't have a huge amount of support, and likely a lot of the undecided ends up going for Zeldin anyway, with independents mostly breaking for Republicans as of now. On top of this, the trends show that Zeldin is getting closer. He clearly did better in the debate than Hochul did, so that will have a massive impact, and I think that's partially why these last few polls, this one from Trafalgar that has him ahead, and this one here that has him just barely behind or within a margin of error, it very well would affect the overall rating of this. I don't know why they haven't added those polls. It's because, like I said, 538 is just garbage. But you add that into account, this margin is probably within the margin of error. Very much so. Like the average would be within margin of error. I'd say take this poll out by now. This is a dumb poll anyway. I doubt it's accurate. Only 37% is Zeldin. For Zeldin is kind of ridiculous when most of the other polls show him at least at 40-something%. So, take out this outlier, keep these polls and add the two other polls, the 1 point and the other one, the Trafalgar poll. You have him pretty close to a margin of error in the state. And with trends, he's still getting consistently closer. Now, there's not much time for him to gain much more ground. It's only a week. But I think he could win this. He is campaigning on the right issues. And again, he's doing well in the polls recently. Hochul has not been popular. She's not very good on pretty much anything. She's just a very dislikable person. And that ultimately will all culminate in, very likely, I'd say, Zeldin winning within a tilt margin. That seems unlikely, but it very well could actually be our reality. Again, looking back at the generic congressional ballot, now this doesn't directly affect, but it shows generally the national environment. And right now, the national environment is favoring Republicans by 2.9%. You take out these two outliers, which just shouldn't have been included, one of them being registered voters. I talked about that in my last video. Republicans lead by about 4 points in the generic congressional vote. Now, that's likely still underestimating Republicans, and it's probably about 5 to 6. So that will have an impact. And again, Biden not being popular, Democrats just in general not being popular right now, Hochul just really cratering in a lot of these polls from what she should be getting. We could see this race flip Republican. So let's just see what that would actually look like on a map. These are all the states already that I predict to go one way or the other for Republicans or Democrats. The only one I might consider changing, or the other two, I guess, would be Maine and Minnesota. I could see both of them going red. But for now, just to be a little more fair, I guess, they're probably going to be Democrat. But red New York. Now, it would be a tilt margin if it happens. But it very well could happen. So we would have 34 governorships, pretty much minimum at this rate. That is huge. Now, it's not guaranteed, but I do think it's very possible that Zeldin wins this and Hochul loses. If that's the case, Democrats have really screwed up. And if that does happen, then it's probably pretty likely that Minnesota and Maine flip as well. And that leaves Democrats with 14 governorships total, and New York flipping Republicans, similarly to how we saw Virginia, another fairly Democrat state, flip. We will also probably see that in Oregon and New Mexico. So, do I think red New York is going to happen? Not necessarily. Do I want it to happen? Yes. Am I hopeful? Fairly hopeful. At the end of the day, I do think it's very possible. It'll be very close no matter what. Within 1 to 2 points either way, no matter what. This is not going to be a wide race at this point. Hochul has destroyed her chance of just sweep winning it in the safe margin, which everyone would have expected a year ago. At this point, it is a toss-up. It is a pure toss-up who wins it. And at the end of the day, I think I'm going to be giving it to Lee Zeldin. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, please again consider subscribing. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers by the midterms. That is about 7 days away. So we are close. We're very close. It might be a bit of a stretch, but any help would be appreciated. I post almost daily content if I can. Anyways, hope you guys have a good night.